Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple Americans. This week featured a couple of away matches, our 24-25 Champions League debut at Atalanta, and our first match of the season against Manchester City. Hello, Keith.
Hi, Dove. So it's good it was such a quiet week, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And we're looking forward to talking more about socks and the Atalanta match. That's what everyone's tuning in for, right?
Yeah, nothing of it. Well, what's the legend? Supposedly on July 4th, 1776, King George wrote in his diary, "Nothing of importance happened today."
Right.
Which may or may not be true, but it always makes for a good story. But anyway,
whether or not apocryphal, still amusing. Well, I wasn't entirely kidding about the sock follow-up. One thing I did want to mention in listening back is just to be totally clear, the left and right foot markings isn't necessarily because the shape of the socks isn't symmetrical. It probably is, and that's probably why the Arsenal players in the beginning of the season with the lightning bolt socks were able to switch them so easily, but because the design on the outside is different on each leg, and that's why they need to point out which one goes on which foot. So we can put that topic to bed. Meanwhile, something else that it was kind of funny. I wasn't paying as close attention to in real time, but then hearing back, it just kind of struck me when we were talking about the talks to get Mauricio Pochettino on board as the U.S. men's national team head coach. The way you describe it just sounds to me like something in like middle school with like, I think he kind of likes you and something like that. And just kind of like note passing back and forth to see, does he really, really like you? And is that normal when you're hiring for a professional football position?
Yes and no. So to a certain extent, there's a certain feeling out because you're never really sure with sort of the jobs and the interest, and nobody wants to like waste their time. Like I know you read that piece there from The Athletic where they have like multiple hour meetings, and you want, before you go in and sit for that kind of thing, you want to have a sense that there is a certain amount of mutual interest. With Pochettino, there's an extra layer there. As we talked about this a little bit. He was still technically under contract with Chelsea and being paid basically not to coach, and that money changes hands. Or that money change, that the amount of money he gets paid changes or even disappears if he takes another job or is, acting as a manager or something like that. So I do think there's a sense of being careful in terms of what they're asking him, how they're talking about it, how it's being done, who's approaching who. And the article points out actually the U.S. soccer has a decent relationship with Chelsea. Obviously, Emma Hayes, the women's coach, one of their owners. Front-facing owners is Todd Bailey, who's an American and definitely a supporter of the U.S. national team. So it's not exactly that kind of thing, but there is also a certain sense of the cloak and dagger is important from a PR perspective. Like there is a certain embarrassment, like you approach someone to be turned down, and you don't want to do it obviously, and not so much from the embarrassment of being turned down, but because it really sends a clear message to the person you end up hiring. Look, you weren't our first choice.
Okay, sure, yeah.
And it's one, and it is one thing, by the way, because supposedly, and the article kind of confirmed this, the U.S. did approach and did have conversations with Jurgen Klopp, which, I mean, everybody wanted to talk to Klopp. Like, no, there's no shame in talking to Klopp and being second choice after arguably one of the most successful managers in the game. But once you start, if you start heading down the list, and some of the other names that were popping in there, Steve Cherundolo, who's, the manager at LAFC and has done a nice job there. But, I mean, Pochettino is a more accomplished manager than Cherundolo, and the idea that he's a second choice to that. I'm not saying he was. I'm not saying that's what's going on there. But once outside of some of the most obvious choices, and now you start getting into a weird world of bruised egos. You go into a press conference. How does it feel to be the third choice manager? Which is not a question you want your guy answering on that kind of day. So you do want to be careful with those kinds of things. And nobody confirms, At least certainly not while the process is ongoing. Have you talked to this person? We're talking to people. So that's more of a PR thing than anything else. It feels a little cloak and dagger at times, but sometimes that's part of the fun of it.
Yeah, that all makes sense. All right, so again, the match that everyone is looking forward to. Let's talk about Atalanta.
Yeah, so
we have to address it.
Yeah, which by the way, I should start by saying a couple of things. We sold them a tiny bit short in the other game, or before it, sort of in the preview section. So Atalanta, currently not having a great season in Italy, at least after the first couple of games. But last year finished in fourth, but also doubly qualified for the Champions League, not only being in the top four in Serie A, but also by winning the Europa League last year. So they were the Europa League champions, which, by the way, we should point out their run to the Europa League title in the knockout stages included beating Sporting Portugal. You may remember them. Liverpool, including a 3-0 win at Anfield. They beat Marseille in the semifinals, and then in the final, a 3-0 win over Bayer Leverkusen, who you may recall didn't lose a single other game at any point in the season.
Right.
So they're pretty good.
Yeah.
And, to walk out of there with a draw, I mean, that's sort of the old formula in European competition, the win at home, draw on the road. To walk out of there with a draw, especially given that game in the context of our other fixtures, of course, City on the weekend and at Spurs, right? Two massive Premier League away games on opposite ends of that. And with the injury to Martin Odegaard and some of the other things we talked about, to walk out with a 0-0 in that game is good, is a good result.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't, you don't want to. I'm not going to sit here and turn my nose down at Atalanta, going, oh, they're just fourth place in Serie A. I know we were talking about how good Serie A used to be or isn't. I mean, those are interesting games, especially two teams. I mean, Arsenal's had no reason to ever play Atalanta until the draw happened. I doubt most Arsenal fans had ever even watched an Atalanta game outside of maybe that Europa League final. Or maybe the Liverpool games when when that was in mid-April, maybe, thinking about how will that impact Liverpool in the Premier League title race. We should also add, by the way, and I had forgotten this, and I saw him playing their defender, Atalanta's defender, Sad Kolasinac, is a former Arsenal man. So actually fought off a mugger while he was with. In London, he's an interesting player. Seems to be having some success there in Italy, so good for him. And so again, I'm pretty happy with the result overall, which is good because I honestly don't have a whole lot of things to say about the game, which was honestly not that interesting. I don't know.
Yeah, overall, I agree with you. I did watch the entire replay and watched it unfold, and I think really what it comes down to, overall our showings were pretty evenly matched, and it was kind of interesting the symmetry of the first half and the second half. The first half, we had the best chance by far. There was a free kick that Saka took that was such a good kick, so close to getting in, and their keeper did a great job. He lunged and got a hand on it and pushed it clear. And he saved that. That was their close call against us. And then in the second half, we had a penalty, a pretty clear. We can talk about it maybe a little bit, but overall, pretty clear penalty that Partey committed, which resulted in a penalty kick that Raya not only amazingly saved and just like nailed it, like leapt as you have to before the kick was taken, guessed right, blocked it, but then scrambled up and blocked the rebound kick also, which was dangerous and easily against any other keeper could have ended up going in and still resulting in a goal for them. So, one great save by them, one great save by us, and we end up with a scoreless draw.
Yeah, that's basically it. I my full confession, I only actually watched the first half. Professional obligations took over, and I did not have an opportunity to find a replay of the second half. And for most of the commentary, that was probably 45 minutes of my life that I get to keep. outside of the save, which we'll talk about in a moment. Yeah, it was a really good free kick from Saka. Like we've talked about sometimes before, right? The guy is lying down behind. They build the wall, and then there's that one guy who kind of lies down behind the wall. That's why you lie down behind the wall, because Saka scoots in, and that's a hard and low, and that's right to the corner. That's a hard save to make, to get fully down and fully extended. And Partey is there to try and clean up the rebound, but the keeper's there to keep him blocked off, and it's a tough angle anyway, so I can't be mad about that. But yeah, other than that, I think we were very conservative overall. Some of that I think was our own sort of trying to play a little more conservatively in the aftermath of not only in the aftermath of an emotional game against Spurs, but also then, of course, the City game coming up on the weekend. I think we were a little more conservative, and also some of it was their play. They pressed us very effectively. That was sort of their strength last season. It's a very different kind of tactic than you see from a lot of teams. And so I think this is going to be kind of an interesting thing, because so often you see early on in these European games, you get teams that don't really know anything about each other. And there's a lot of this long sort of cagey feeling each other out. How do we handle this? What do we do? It gets worse in the knockout stages because, of course, you don't want to make the mistake that gives up the goal. But what's interesting in the group stages, historically, you would get to play this team again. And the second time would be different because you'd be adjusting to things they're doing. We will not see Atalanta again until potentially, I guess, the knockout stages. I don't think there's any restrictions on, because the old restriction in the knockout stage was you couldn't draw somebody in your group, at least in the round of 16. So I don't know. Maybe we could see Atalanta later. I don't know. I didn't think there was any restriction against repeat games like that. So
sure.
But yeah, that might be the last time we see them until, I don't know, it could be years, honestly, given the way the Champions League or European competition plays out. I don't know what to make of that. We'll talk about this at the end, right? But this strange new world of the new Champions League and the league phase of the Champions League phase, because that's not awkward at all to say. Yeah. I mean, overall, I'm into the new format so far. I mean, the fact that we get to see more teams, which I'm sure is their biggest goal, is for fans who are following one team through to get to see a wider variety of teams that you play against. I guess the asymmetry is the biggest downside, that, you get one chance, and if you happen to play this team away that maybe you would have beaten at home and you don't get a chance to do the reverse fixture, I guess we don't get to see if we could have beaten them at home, but yeah, I mean, the real reason they're doing it this way, because there's now 36 teams instead of 32, and there's now 10 games or 8 games for every team instead of 8. Excuse me, 8 games instead of 6. The reason they're doing this is because it's more games, which means more money. That's why they're doing this. Let's not overcome that. I appreciate your sweet naive notions of the goodness of the game, but this is about money. And we know that it's fine. But yeah, it is kind of interesting to see. And so we saw that. I think also, on the other side, first, I have only seen the replay. And so, of course, I knew what happened as I was watching it, and in fact, sought out what was going on. But having seen Partey taking down Ederson, is that a penalty for you?
The contact was definitely a foul. What the commentary was in real time was that VAR was reviewing whether or not the contact occurred in the penalty box. And it was a particularly tricky situation because there was contact that kind of caused a slow motion, falling down. And by the time he goes down, he's definitely in the box. But did the contact originate before he's in the penalty box was really the question. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what they go by with other calls. It's pretty much, is the ball over the line or not? But when it's a foul player on player, is it where the player's feet are? Is it where the contact occurs? I don't know what they go by. I don't know that I have a really informed opinion on whether it was over the line or not.
It's where the contact takes place, because that's where the foul occurs.
Right. So where skin meets skin or studs meet shin or whatever.
Wherever they decide the foul and contact took place, that's where it'll be. I mean, but as you watch that, in terms of the contact, do you buy that as a foul and worthy of a penalty?
Well, I mean, a foul in the box becomes a penalty.
Well, but remember, we've seen this, right? Circumstances seem to matter when calls are made, and so there are things you will see referees kind of, they'll look just to take the fine-tooth comb out, because if it's in the box, it's a penalty. And I mean, is the foul worthy of giving a player not a guarantee at a goal, but obviously a very strong possibility of a goal?
But yeah, no, I mean, he was taking down someone who was attempting to score. I mean, it seems like a pretty cut and dried case, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, and admittedly, this was mostly what I saw in terms of commentary. Some of the commentary, again, from Arsenal fans or very Arsenal perspective, not necessarily media commentary. Their thoughts for some was it was a bit soft as a foul, and particularly was the kind of foul you wouldn't have seen called in the Premier League. Now, what that may or may not say about Premier League officiating is a different thing, but it is worth pointing out. European football, European competition is in some ways refereed a little tighter than you'll see in England. England is the Premier League is generally a league that is much more welcoming to some heavy physical play, and there are things that are easy fouls on the continent that kind of may go uncalled in the English game. To say anything of Scotland, which is obviously just pretty rough and tumble, but it is kind of an interesting thing. So I'd heard some suggestion from some Arsenal fans. They kind of felt that that's a foul in Europe, maybe not in England. But, again, when I saw the replay, I already knew what it was, and I knew it had been called. But as I watched it, yeah, that's an easy penalty. That's an obvious one. There's clear contact from Partey. He gets beat. I thought he was solid in the first half. I thought he was okay in the first half that I saw. We'll talk about him in the City game later. But this was not a good moment for him. He gets beat. And he makes contact, and the guy goes down. I mean, does he maybe go down a little easy? Maybe, but again,
par for the course there. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, if always right. If that situation was in the reverse, right? If that was an Arsenal player beats his defender and goes down like that, I'd want a penalty. I don't feel, and so yeah. That being said, it sets up really the moment of the match, which is David Raya. First off, let's be fair. It wasn't a great penalty, was it?
No.
Which takes nothing away from Raya's initial save, but he reads that guy the entire way. And I think they talked about it. I don't know if you saw it, commented on it. Like, obviously, VAR is looking at it. Raya takes that opportunity to go over and speak to Iñaki Kanya, the keeper coach, and clearly was talking about the shooter and his tendencies. Which he wouldn't necessarily have been able to do if there wasn't what I understand was a fairly lengthy VAR review. Is that right? In terms of the length of the length of the review,
right?
Obviously, in terms of I don't know if you saw that part, but
it was long enough ago. I mean, I don't remember anymore.
It's all the way back on Thursday.
Yeah, those midweek matches.
Has been a long time since Thursday. That's fair. Okay, yeah, but he clearly knows where he's going. He's already headed to the right when the shot's taken. He's perfectly in position to make the save.
Yep.
Except for the part where he gives up the rebound.
Well, yeah. I mean, you do the best you can, and it was hard hit. Regardless of however else you feel about the way that it was aimed, it was, he shot like he meant it. He wasn't like doing a chip or a little lob.
Comes right back, to the player's head. And then, so of course he heads it on goal, and what happens? Nothing. There's no goal. There is no goal. Because Raya did it again. I'm sure I'm going to butcher his name. Matteo Retegui, I think is how they say it. Retegui?
Yeah, I don't remember anymore.
I feel bad. I do feel bad about that. But anyway, yeah. On the one hand, it reminds me a little bit of the Watkins header from the Villa game, and when Raya had the double save there. It's like, it's not the greatest header. But at the same time, even as we say, it's not a great penalty, not the greatest header, that's ridiculous. The two saves are ridiculous.
Yeah, no, I love Raya more and more every time I see him play.
It's yeah. I mean, wow. And given the way the game played out, and again, it's hard to say. You can't say, well, if he puts in the header, then we lose 1-0. I mean, obviously, game state plays a role. Are we, we're talking about being conservative and preserving ourselves for the second, for the weekend or what have you. We saw the subs. You mentioned your early subs. Party and Jesus coming out 58 minutes before the hour. I mean, that's an early sub for Arteta. He's not forced into making a sub. He usually won't see anything until like the 70th minute.
Well, I think part of that, like with hindsight now, I didn't notice this at the time, but bringing Calafiori in early enough, like giving him a good 20 minutes of play, clearly he had an eye on him to start against City, right? And wanted him to get a run out and kind of, shake off the cobwebs from his injury, whatever it was, like kind of get him some play time. So when he starts with City, it wasn't his first time playing in a couple weeks,
Oh yeah, I think that, especially in retrospect, that seems obvious. And I mean, I think he wants Calafiori to play because he wants Calafiori to play because he's a good player. I mean, we have talked many times, right, about how Arteta kind of shortens his bench as the season goes on and doesn't trust a lot of his bench players. And it kind of puts you in a weird bind, right? When these guys actually play, are they really ready to play? Or it's like, he doesn't trust them because he doesn't trust them. They don't play because they don't play. They aren't really ready when they come on. And so you don't trust them. And so you're kind of caught in that cycle. And so I think there's a little bit of that rotation as well. Obviously as well, maybe not even necessarily to an eye with Calafiori starting, but an eye towards that City game on Sunday. You have to, you want to get some guys some rest depending on who you want in and what we're thinking about who plays where. But overall, I'm given the strength of Atalanta, given the circumstances of the season and where we are. Obviously, some of the people we're missing. I'm not going to complain about a draw an away draw against a quality opponent, which currently leaves us 16th or tied for 16th in the Champions League phase. I'm just going to keep saying it that way. I think the rest of the season.
So that was one thing I wanted to ask you about because I don't remember. I remember the kind of the setup is that we're going to play everybody once, and then how is it decided who moves on? There's a table, and we've just earned 1 point for this match. Is that it? Or
yes. So all 36 teams are in one giant league table, and they will play 8 games. Yes, they'll play 8 games. And it's just like a league table. They will get points. Goal difference will come into play. Away goals are part of the tiebreakers. Hang on. So it's goal difference, then goals scored, then away goals scored, wins, away wins. Higher number of points obtained collectively by opponents. Superior collective goal difference of league phase opponents. Higher number of goals scored collectively by league phase opponents. Lower disciplinary points total. So you get points based on, the cards your team accumulates. And then finally, if there's no other tiebreakers, the UEFA club coefficient.
Does it go down that far? Like, do they have that many contingencies in the Premier League scoring system? Is this because I mean, I could see it being because you only have 8 matches, you're more likely to have like closer contests.
Oh yeah. They'll go pretty deep. I do think they reached the point in the league. I'm gonna vamp while I pull up I do think they do. While I pull up the actual info, I do think they go pretty deep in terms of things like drawing lots. I do think they ultimately get to a point where they'll just essentially flip a coin,
right?
Which is not unheard of in sports. That's just kind of that every once in a while. I mean, I think the NFL really actually does have a tiebreaker. In terms of it actually does end in a coin flip. So apparently, so I guess there is ultimately potentially a playoff in the Premier League, depending on what positions are at stake. Again, this is obviously if the position in question matters for something. This is talks about for European competition.
Right.
Champions, relegated teams, or qualified teams for UEFA competitions. So if it's a choice between going 12th and 13th, no one cares.
Right.
Technically, there's more money coming from finishing a position higher, but I don't think the teams involved even really care.
Right, or even like second and third, where you're guaranteed a spot in the Champions League and you're not going to win the Premier League trophy. So
yeah, exactly. So yeah, if it in that case they both moved into that position. So yes, they do go that deep into
Okay.
They do go that deep into tiebreakers. We are currently tied for 16th with 1 point from one draw with no goals given or allowed or scored, which ties us with, among all teams, Atalanta, Bologna, Inter Milan. Oh, what a surprise! Italian teams all playing 0-0. Shakhtar Donetsk and wait for it, Manchester City. Oddly enough, who drew with Inter Milan in their opener at home, which we'll talk about. But anyway, yeah. So all 36 teams will play. The top 8 will advance automatically to the round of 16, and then the next 16 teams will advance to a knockout phase. The top 8 will be drawn against the bottom 8,
Right.
and the winners of those matches will then go on to play into the round of 16 and be drawn against the top 8 finishers.
And then what happens to the bottom 8? Because I know in the past some of them would be relegated to the Europa League or something. Is that still happening?
No, there will be no relegation anymore. That has been eliminated at this point. I don't know that. Yeah, there were some relegations in the qualification rounds leading up to the league phase, which will take, we're sent to the Europa League, but that is no longer happening. If you're in the league phase, this is it. You either get out of the league phase or you're done. Well, right. I guess I should say you're getting out of the league phase, whether it's into the knockout rounds or just out of Europe altogether.
Back home, yeah.
Currently on top of the table is Bayern Munich, who won 9-2. So they have 3 points and a +7 goal difference. Of course, their opponents in that game, Dinamo Zagreb, are in last place, a -7 goal difference on 0 points, which, by the way, we will see Dinamo Zagreb later in this Champions League.
Right. Yeah, cool. All right, well, the match that we not jokingly actually need to talk about, and will probably send us way over time, but we'll try to do our best to keep it to an hour-ish or so. Let's talk about City.
First off, can I just say how weird it was that this is the 5th game of the season? Like, it feels too early to have, like, a high-stakes white-knuckle game. In part because it is too early for that. There's 33 games left. It is not even the end of September. And yeah, this one was a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll lead with this, and I'll see what you think. I know you're not onto more of the banter side of all of this, and don't really pay attention to teams other than Arsenal, which is totally fair and probably a very healthy way to approach this. But there's a moment that came out in the aftermath, and of course I'm thinking about it now, and so I'm going to, again, vamp while I actually look up to get the quotes, but there was a moment that came in the aftermath of the end of the season, where City were celebrating on the field, and this was a comment from Rodri, the Manchester City midfielder, who said afterwards, this was after the end of the season, they're at the Etihad, they win the trophy, and he was asked about winning and sort of mentioning their previous game. He said, "To be honest, it's in here," pointing to his head. "It's the mentality. Arsenal did an unbelievable season, but I think the difference was in here. When they came here, they faced us at the Etihad. I saw them. I said, these guys, they don't want to beat us. They just want to draw. And that mentality, we wouldn't do it the same way. At the end, if you give us 1 point, we will win the last 7, 8 games, even though how tough it is. So I think it is in terms of mentality." Which is an interesting comment. Now, I know you were from Chicago,
which is oddly relevant for this match if you watched the NBC coverage.
I wasn't actually thinking that, but yes, NBC doing their in the US Fan Fest. But yes, I know you're from Chicago, so I know you were a fan of the late '90s Bulls.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing you and the rest of America, because we had nothing better to do, watched the early lockdown documentary on the Jordan's Bulls, The Last Dance. Did you see that?
Unfortunately, no. It has been on my list as long as it's been around. I have not watched it yet. I really want to. I just have not made time for it yet. But
so there's one bit. I mean, again, a good subplot of the whole thing is how Michael Jordan is a raging competitive jerk. And how there's one that, constantly became a meme. And in this case, it was a comment made by some other player. And it ends with a line that just it's endlessly repeated, and Jordan hearing about something another player had said, and he goes, and I took that personally. I think Arsenal took that personally. Nobody said anything. Nobody said, there was no commentary before the game. Nobody was saying any comments or anything like that. But we're about 15 seconds into the game. City has the kickoff. They play the ball back towards Ederson, as one does. We do the same thing with Raya. And all of a sudden, the camera shifts back, and you see players pushing and shoving while Rodri's on the ground.
Right.
Now, this feels like a real Rashomon moment. Because you can look at it either way. But I think what's fair to say, Rodri and Havertz come into contact with each other. Now, is Havertz seeking out Rodri? Is Rodri stepping in to shield him off? I'm not really sure. But Havertz definitely, what's the English flip phrase? Leaves it on him. Now, again, some of this, I think, is a little bit of shameful play acting on Rodri's part. But it really kind of sets the tone for the whole game, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, the one thing I will say as far as was he acting, he clearly had some kind of injury he was nursing, given how he ended up being taken out of the game later, not too much after this. So, no, the contact was laughable.
Yeah, we'll talk about the injury. I mean, like, he's playing, like, rubbing his jaw and kind of like, what are we doing here, man? Like, he's clearly begging for a card. It's felt pretty cheap.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is actually hurt later in the game, and comment their minimal contact. That looked bad, like, because he and Partey sort of like kind of bumping each other. This isn't on Partey at all. Rodri kind of goes down. When a guy goes down with no contact, that's bad.
Right.
That's real. Like, we saw that. That's what we saw with Timber. I think it was from Timber last season.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean,
he might not come back this season, and I say that with zero pleasure. I take zero pleasure in that. I don't like to see players get hurt. But that's not good. And he's a critical player. I mean, City's worst stretch last season came in a couple of games. They dropped points in a couple of games because he was suspended. I mean, he is arguably their most important player in terms of what he does and brings to the team. And they were suffering a little bit. They weren't quite as strong after he went out, which was obvious. But I do think it's worth pointing out, certainly from the context of talking about the physical play. Because a few minutes later, we saw Erling Haaland, throw himself into defenders, but that's just a thing Haaland does. He does it with Saliba. These teams don't like each other. And I don't want to sit here and say how awesome it is that people hate each other, and we don't want to see too much in the way of violence, but there is something different about a real rivalry. I mean, there's a rivalry like where they're, like us and Spurs. Yes, we're two teams. We wear the red and white. They wear the white, and it's the jerseys always make for something of a tense affair. But there are a lot of times where it's like, look, if they weren't Spurs, if that was Everton, like no one would care. And then you get the rivalries that have like real animosity, and usually that comes from being competitive, right? Like, Liverpool and City have a pretty good thing going, in part because they were competing for titles, and we were increasingly there. And this is real. This is real animosity. There is real dislike between both teams, and it is a lot of fun to watch. Not in the moment, it kind of drives you crazy, but there is something, there's something thrilling about it. I mean, watch some highlight videos of like some Arsenal United games from the early 2000s. The battle at Old Trafford. I mean, aside from the fact the game is just more physical then than it is now, refereed very differently. It was real. They did not like each other. There was real animosity between the players, and it does make for a much more thrilling game.
Yeah. Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, to a point. when that potentially ends up earning us yellow cards that change the course of the match.
Okay, but before we get to that, there were 3 goals in the first half, which, by the way, we played City 3 times last year, and there were 3 goals across all 3 games.
Right.
So let's talk about the goals. And it was City that took the early lead. Holland, slots one home. I mean, it's not a good look from Calafiori, who gets beat by the winger. And then it's a good pass to find Holland as he splits the central defenders. Yes, you could criticize the two of them, either one of them for not fleeing more tightly to him. But he is a really good player. And Holland breaks through, and it's a good finish. With the keeper bearing down on him, slots at home, 1-0 to City. I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous at that point.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if I had to sum up this match, like, emotional roller coaster is absolutely it. Like, at this point, I was crestfallen. I was like, oh no. Yeah. This is how it starts, right? And you get the commentators talking about how this is his 10th goal happening in the 5th match, breaking the record he set last year of getting his 10th goal in the 6th match, breaking the goal he got the year before, getting in the 7th match. Just this guy.
Scores a lot of goals. He scores a lot of goals.
His 100th goal. This was his 100th goal. And he's only been playing a little over 2 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
For City, we should point out. This is 100th goal for City. And yeah.
Oh, was okay. No, I did not know that, so I misunderstood then.
Yeah, no, he had a pretty good career. I want to say he was at Dortmund.
Okay.
Embarrassing. Yeah, he played and he was in Europe and got plucked up by City. He wasn't just found somewhere. He was playing in a fairly decent sized club, and then City came, big money came calling.
Yeah, he's young enough. I guess what I imagined was that he had just like gone to university or something, and this was like his first club out of school or something.
No. You don't see that in the league. No, I mean they don't do college sports in Europe like they do in the U.S. And so these guys are starting. They're playing. I mean, Odegaard is similar. I mean, the two Norwegians, Haaland and Odegaard. By the way, Norway has Erling Haaland and Martin Odegaard. And they stink.
I know, that's all they have on their team.
It's unreal how good those two guys are. And Norway is still not good. Anyway, yeah. Right. But we had it. We're down. Obviously, we're gonna play more defensive. We're gonna sit back. We're gonna try to absorb pressure. I don't want to say content for the 0-0, but I think if you had offered us a 0-0 at the start of the day, I think most of us would have signed up for that. Obviously, that's not going to happen now. And then, first the goal itself.
Yeah.
Welcome to Arsenal, Ricardo Calafiori.
Really.
What a finish.
Yeah.
What a finish.
Now, the commentators were saying they weren't totally sure, was it a shot or was it a cross? If that was supposed to be a cross, it wasn't going very sideways. I don't know where they came up with that. That definitely looked like a shot to me.
Well, I mean, the idea would be, it's not a cross in the sense, like we think of a cross being, outside the box and going parallel across. The idea is sort of like a free kick floated into the box for someone to pick up and head. Now, having said that, I don't think that was the case. I think he lined up and took that shot. But that looked like a shot to me. It kind of floats. It feels like it's floating through the air a little bit, which I think is where sort of the is it a cross question comes from.
Okay.
But having said that, I think that was a shot. He certainly looked like it, he reacted to me like that's what he was trying to do. It was pretty awesome to watch. It was an incredible goal. I loved the celebration. He almost takes out Arteta in the celebration. I love that. But here's the interesting thing. So that happens, by the way, because there is controversy surrounding that. That comes off of a relatively quick Arsenal free kick.
Yes.
I don't know. Did you have any thoughts about that as a controversy?
Well, I mean, so it wasn't totally clear. They played it where the ball was left. It wasn't like... So just being explicit about what the controversy is they were showing that they took the free kick allegedly 8 yards forward of where the penalty occurred, right? Which, by the way, I will note, after that was pointed out, I saw, or maybe even before, there were multiple times that I saw City going way up the sidelines with their throw-ins and stuff. Like, this is clearly not so beyond the pale, right? But it wasn't like he picked the ball up and marched it forward and set it down. Like, this is where the play ended. Like, the contact began maybe 8 yards up, but it wasn't like they moved it 8 yards forward intentionally to gain advantage from what I could see.
Yeah, well, so there's the movement of the ball, which is just nonsense. No, I mean, if the referee doesn't move it back, then whatever. Especially near midfield like that. But part of the complaint was also that the referee had pulled the captains, Saka, wearing the armband, by the way, great to see, had pulled Saka, and Kyle Walker, who was the captain for City, had pulled them over to have a conversation and sends them back before the kick is taken.
Right.
Now, City wants to argue that they were not allowed to get back into position and the referee allowed the kick to be taken. And my answer to that is the same thing that Arsenal was told every time we complained about that over the years, which is get over it. Get back into position. It is not the referee's fault that you weren't paying enough attention.
Gotta hustle.
That Walker is ambling back to his spot rather than running like he should be, and that sets up the goal. So I don't have any sympathy for them on that. That's what we were told. Arsenal has several times in recent years, including against City, been caught out, and it doesn't usually end up being a big story because, okay, fine, it's the third goal in a 5-1 game. Like, who cares? Who really cares? But yeah, I don't have any sympathy for them there.
Right.
And so that was, so Calafiori gets the goal. And then shortly before the half, boy, Kyle Walker had a rough half, man.
Yes.
They're afraid of Gabby. And they should be.
Well, it was funny with this play in particular. So I was watching the build-up, right? I was watching them jostling for position, and I saw Kyle Walker play, like you were saying, like kind of being handsy with Gabriel, right? Like just messing with him, just like kind of slapping him, and Gabriel just kind of playing back until all of a sudden, like, whatever, the Saka's arm went up, whatever the signal was. And he was like a bolt of lightning toward that goal. Like, you could practically see Kyle Walker like spinning in place in his wake, right?
He beats Walker clean. He gets a clean header. That was a physical goal. That was awesome to see. I mean, and because that had happened just a few minutes earlier. He didn't quite get ahead on the ball. Ball was maybe a little high. He's kind of under it, and so he can't get it. So it ends up going over. But he beat another man. Same thing. They're trying to mess with him, and they can't do it. They're afraid of him, and it's understandable. This, he's such a weapon on the set pieces, and right now he's kind of on a heater. With the goal, against Spurs.
Yeah.
They had no answer for him. And also credit there. Saka, another assist. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to check this. I feel like he's had a goal, or he had the goal or the assist on every goal Arsenal has scored this season.
Could be. I mean, what they talked about on the broadcast is he is the first player in Arsenal's history since Thierry Henry to achieve an assist in all of the first 5 Premier League games of the season.
Yeah, I mean, he is, I think, I've said this, I think he's the best player on the team.
Yeah.
There's his raw talent level, and there's so much more to him, and he's again, like we talked about, even in a game where it feels like he doesn't do a whole lot, he's still obviously a very important piece and does a lot for us. But we're not talking about Saka anymore. We're not talking about any of this because shortly before the half, so we should point out, Leandro Trossard receives a second yellow card. He had received a first one earlier in the half. Well, you're skeptical about this one?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like maybe a foul. I wasn't sold on that being a yellow card. It looked like he pulled the guy's shirt. It didn't look to me egregious. I think there is a case to be made that perhaps that one shouldn't have been a yellow card either.
Maybe. I mean, it's a pretty obvious shirt pull. Like, there's no attempt made on the ball or even the player. He gets, and it's a pretty good stretch on the shirt. To me, that was, I can't complain about that yellow at all. So here's the interesting thing about the second yellow. Now, obviously, as we talk about, you're watching the broadcast and you can hear the broadcasters. Where I am, we can't hear. I can't hear anything, or rarely can I hear things they say. What did they say?
Yes,
the card was for.
This is an interesting part of the story, actually. So, as it was happening, everybody on the broadcast, and keep in mind, they point out they are listening live to the VAR during the broadcast. So they're hearing what the officiating team is discussing, right? Everybody was talking about reviewing the check to Bernardo Silva. That's what they were talking about is that valid? And clearly, because it's a yellow, not a straight red, there's nothing that VAR is going to ultimately have to say about that, probably, right?
Well, at that point, they are reviewing it to say, is it a straight red card offense? Because VAR can only say that's a red or that's not a red. They cannot.
Exactly.
Like, they can't. Now, here's the thing, though. Of course, that change. If Oliver had decided that was the yellow, well, then there's nothing. They'll check and see. Well, maybe it should be a straight red, which really only affects how many games he's suspended.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. He obviously would be out of the game at that point.
So basically, that is the leading theory going into halftime: is that this yellow card was for the contact on Silva. Because of the way that this half ended, I watched the halftime show. I don't always watch the halftime show. The majority of the time I don't. But I was watching it, and they were all talking about whether or not that contact deserved a yellow card. And they were pretty much unanimous in no, it didn't, right? Foul, sure, okay, definitely not a yellow card.
Yeah.
They go to commercial break and then come back, and Rebecca Lowe gives an update that no, they're actually talking about the yellow card being for time wasting, for kicking the ball away again, right? And so then they get back to the match starting, and the color commentators are then referring to what she has said and saying, well, that's interesting. They need to get their stories straight. That's not what we were hearing. So there's a whole air of controversy around this.
Yeah. So, like we talked about, obviously, it would only been if that's what they're reviewing the contact, that obviously, it only becomes, well, is it a straight red or a yellow? Because if the referee has decided it's a yellow, well, then there's no, like, they don't look at it separately because it's a second yellow. They're deciding, is it a straight red or is it up to the referee's discretion? I would have, and that's what we thought too. Again, I'm watching in the pub, surrounded by people, so there's a lot of ambient noise. This is why we can't hear the commentary. That's what we had thought too, and that was a frustrating yellow given the kinds of contact, Holland, that was left uncalled throughout the game.
Right,
and then during halftime it starts to trickle out, and there was a tweet from PGMOL that said it was for delaying the restart. I have two problems with this.
Yeah.
Here's the big moment of the show today. I got two problems with this. The first is the application of the rule is monstrously inconsistent. We saw Doku do the exact same thing early in the game and get nothing for it. And we all were hollering for a yellow, half seriously, as I'll get to in a moment. But the fact that can happen consistently throughout the game and not receive any sanction, not even like unless the referee's doing it just verbally, and of course we can't see that on TV, but as a warning, but otherwise receive no sanction. And then suddenly in this moment become a sending off. And he knows that's what it is.
Right.
Like he's making the choice to give a yellow for that, and that, like, he knows that that's what happened. This isn't, a lot of times you'll see time wasting yellows like to a keeper late in the game. Do you think the general theory is that the referee will never give a second yellow for that? It'll always be the one as a warning. But to give in that circumstances is just, it's absurdly inconsistent. The other side of that, and here's my second point with this, is why is this a yellow card offense at all? Because wasn't the whole point, right, coming out of the World Cup, part of the whole point is that we're going to get rid of time wasting by adding time onto the end of the half. Now, people complained that the end of the half was 10 minutes long, which will tell you a lot about how the rest of that game was going. That you end up with 10 minutes onto your stoppage time. But the fact is, they have trying to be more diligent about adding the amount of time actually lost as a result of various time wasting things. If that is the case, and the time that was wasted from that, what is the purpose of the card? If you're already if the time wasting doesn't do the thing it's supposed to do. Time wasting makes sense if you know the referee is only going to get 2 minutes regardless of what happens and is going to blow his whistle at 2:02. Like, but knowing that that can continue to extend, and by the way, I know some people are complaining about, it being 8 minutes after 6 minutes was given. I mean, look, Arsenal scored right at 45 minutes. Like, there was plenty of time for celebration. There were a couple of short stoppages. Like, I don't have and we know stoppage time usually extends through an offensive opportunity. I don't have a huge problem with, the game extending into a sixth or seventh minute of stoppage time, even to an eighth minute when that took place. But if we're going to do that, then what is the point of a card for that in that circumstance? It strikes me as a solution that doesn't really address the issue at hand. And you add in the inconsistency of all of it. And in some ways, this game, that first half, is a wonderful advertisement for the league, right? It was tense. It was tactical. It was emotional. It's, players and tacticians of high quality. There's a lot to talk about in that first half. And instead, we're talking about this. And it's just completely unnecessary. And again, this is from a referee. Michael Oliver refereed the reverse fixture last year. He was the referee for the game City at the Emirates. And, we saw late in the first half, Mateo Kovacic, who came on for Rodri, goes studs up into Odegaard's ankles for what, frankly, should have been a yellow card and would have been his second. And it could have a lot of the post-game commentary was that he was very lucky to still be on the pitch, which I think is right. Admittedly, as an Arsenal fan, but still, was very lucky to still be on the pitch. And the commentary post-game, not from Oliver, because the referee never talks, but from Howard Webb, who's in charge of the PGMOL, said that he decided not to send off Kovacic because he didn't want to, quote, ruin the game. I'm just going to let that sit for a moment. It's just ridiculous. It should be embarrassing for the league. And look, does Trossard perhaps need to be more careful there? Maybe. I mean, given what we've seen with Rice, but let's remember that was a stupid yellow card too. Like,
right.
Really, that's what we're carding. That's what these are for. And it completely changes the complexion of the game because now you come out for the second half and Arsenal has to sit 10 men behind the ball. We were always going to be more defensive anyway, especially with the lead, which people can complain about it. Oh, Liverpool went and played for us. I don't care. We're not Liverpool. We're Arsenal. We're going to play the way we want to play. I don't, I find I have zero time for that. I don't care. But the fact is you kind of have to with this case. I mean, at one point, they had possession in the second half was what, like 92-8? We had completed 16 passes, like something. But I gotta tell you, God, we were so good defensively.
Well, yeah. I mean, so rounding out the story of the first half, so Gabriel scores. I literally had tears coming out of my eyes behind my Apple Vision Pro headset on which I'm watching this match that I can't dry because I don't want to mess with it, right? Yeah. And I've never been so emotional watching a soccer match before, right? It's oh my God, I go from the dejection of Haaland's goal thinking, oh, okay, this is what it's going to be, to Calafiore, oh my God, we're in it still, to Gabriel, oh my God, we actually could win this thing, right? And then to have that happen and end the half that way, it was just, I couldn't believe it, right?
It's a roller coaster of an hour.
Yeah. And so then we go into the second half, right? We see Benjamin White come in for Saka. Okay, you can tell already from that what their strategy is going to be, right?
I mean, I have to say, I was a bit surprised that Saka came off. I mean, I would have guessed Martinelli. I wonder if, because we talked a little bit about that. Now, Saka played 70-plus minutes against Atalanta. I do wonder if they're still a little iffy with him injury-wise.
Yeah.
But having said that, I do want to say I thought Martinelli played very well in the second. I mean, for the team as a whole, obviously played very well in the second half. I think Martinelli in particular, for what he was going to be asked to do at that stage.
Yeah.
And I tell you, they did not have, for a team of their quality, City, they did not have a lot of dangerous opportunities. Every pass around the outside was a victory.
Yeah.
And you saw how a lot of times that ball, you remember that horseshoe of death we talked about years ago, just passing around the box? That's what they were doing. Look at how many shots they took that were from distance. Like, that, I mean, we were so good.
Yeah, and we forced them into this super predictable pattern where they'd pass it to the outside, we'd shift to the outside, they'd pass it back to the middle, we'd shift to the middle, and they'd shoot, and we'd block it, right? And I don't know how many times, I don't remember seeing this very much at all in any other game, but it was all game long, honestly, but really a lot in the second half where we're just like lifting our feet and just like slamming balls down out of the air that were like either high kicks or just like bouncing balls, just like intercepting over and over again. And what do? Do we break on the counter? No, we just punt and let them try again.
There were one or two instances where it looked like they were trying or thinking about it, but the opportunity closed, or like all of a sudden Martinelli's got the ball and he's got three guys on him, hoof it out of bounds, just get back into play.
Yeah,
like, this is not the time to play hero ball. This is the time to you dig in. And I mean, it got crazy, man. It got crazy.
So we enter this second half. We see that they're going to have this defensive posture, right? They're talking on the commentary about a 5-4 formation, which is what it was, right?
Yeah.
And
I think at some point it wound up as like a 6-3 by the end. I mean, they
probably, yeah. So it's like, you know what this is going to be like, and you know that this is against City, right? Like the strongest offense in the league, and going back a while now, right? We're going against them, and we know that it's going to be wave after wave, and I'm just like, oh God, okay. Well, we've gotten into the 60th minute. Okay, we're still in it. Okay. It got to be around the 70th minute, and I started feeling like, oh man, we may actually pull out a win from this, right? And that feeling built and built and built well into stoppage time.
I mean, the one thing you really can't do in those circumstances is count the clock, because the clock will always move slowly. Like when you're digging in, all you can think about is, how do I stop the next one? How do I stop the next one? And don't worry about the clock. You push as hard as you can until you can't. We saw a couple of guys get winded, some cramping. Timber at one point, he started cramping, and then he was like, you got to sub me out. Calafiori had to come out at one point for Kivior. To me, the Calafiori one, I kind of wonder if it wasn't so much a case of he was actually unable to go on, or more just a case of whatever happens, he's going to have to stand on the sidelines for a couple of seconds until the ref waves him back on. And Arteta just decided, nope, I'm not going down to 9 men for 30 seconds. I'm not doing it.
Right.
Just put Kivior on. Just put him on.
Yeah.
We're gonna skip this part.
Yeah, no, it definitely could be.
I kind of wondered about that, but I mean, they were immense. Time wasting, yellow cards, which again at this stage of the game, I do not care.
No.
I think my favorite was a yellow card given to one Miles Lewis Skelly.
Yes.
Who received a yellow card before ever actually playing a minute in the Premier League, which has got to be a record of some sort.
Yeah, a dubious record, yes.
And then came on, and then good for him. Actually came on, and I thought he did all right. Again, kind of weird. He came on the field already on a yellow, which is a weird thing in the circumstances.
So what was the yellow card even for? Like, what? I don't understand what he did from the sidelines to earn a yellow card.
So there was a rumor floating around that he was yelling at Raya to like fake an injury or something, or to time waste. That was a rumor. I don't think there's anything. I think my suspicion is the referee he said something towards the referee is probably what it was, because that you're not supposed, especially if you're a sub and on the sideline.
Well, yeah.
But I do think, it obviously it was something along those lines, I think. Yeah, it's a weird one, and it's going to contribute ultimately to that kind of siege mentality the club is going to have and the players are going to have. And they did everything. Raya was immense, and several just outstanding saves. I think he had one. The
Yeah.
ball, I think it was Haaland had a header and did it perfectly. Bounces into the ground, and Raya is able to get down and get a hand on it. I mean, that's a great save.
Yeah, that was in stoppage time. Like, that was a few minutes before they ended up actually scoring. He caught some dangerous crosses from their corner kicks because they had earned a few corner kicks. He deflated those.
Did the thing he does where he deals with crosses, right?
Yeah. So
and then just, I mean, they came about as close as you can come.
So this part was frustrating because we'd seen they did have a bunch of crosses while they were in the horseshoe of death, right? Or not crosses, corner kicks while they were in the horseshoe of death, right? This had happened a few times, and it even happened another couple times in stoppage time, like leading up to the one that they scored from, right?
Yeah.
They played every single one of them quick and short. Every single one. And yet we were somehow caught off guard by it this time. Like, what happened?
I don't think we were caught off guard. I think it's just, I mean, I think in a lot of ways, just it's some of the fatigue. Because that's the hard part about defending for that long is you have to be completely switched on for every single moment. We saw that with City in the first goal, right? Walker doesn't move quickly enough to get back into position, and Martinelli's able to beat them down the wing and get into space, get the ball to Calafiori goal, etc. It only takes a moment. That's part. City's doing that for two reasons. One, they want to move quickly to keep up the intensity, not give Arsenal a chance to get any sort of structure established. But also, you want to move quickly, in part because they outside of Haaland, they were the smaller team, so you don't want to float it into the box and look for a header. I mean, Haaland's great, and maybe you could find him, but Arsenal's got Martinelli, Gabriel and Saliba and Kivior's on the field, and these are big guys. There's just a lot. Declan Rice was in there, who's a big guy. There's a lot of height, and you're kind of at a disadvantage. And so, from City's perspective, the short corner. But you saw then, I mean, they played the short corner and then floated the cross in. The goal is to kind of to destabilize Arsenal, and they end up creating the chaos, and the ball comes to Stones, and about as late as possible, they get the goal. And then the two teams went at it again, sort of in the last minute, and then post game. I mean, I don't know. So here's my big picture thought, and I was certainly heated afterwards. It took me, even by my standards, it took me a little while to come down afterwards. This one. I don't want to play the game of moral victories. A win is a win. You don't get 2 points because you feel good about yourselves. You get 3 points because you scored more goals than the other team. But having said that, I mean, consider the circumstances we came in here with. Our captain, and obviously our key offensive player, Odegaard, is out, right? Completely out. Another member of our first choice midfield, Marino, who wins duels and won the Euros with Rodri over the summer, he's out. He's not playing.
So I hear, yes.
We came in off of not a short week, right? Because we played on Thursday for some forsaken reason. We played our game on Thursday. City played on Wednesday at home. We played Thursday on the road. So with an extra day of rest and travel, and having come off the previous weekend, having played a road game against a big rival, to do all of that. And that's before we even get into the commentary we've made about the officiating and sort of the idea that we ended up having to play a man down for the entire second half, which ran on quite a long time. To do all of that, and City needed every last second to earn a draw at home.
Yeah.
Because we're better than them.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing to say. Remember when we first started this? We're like, why is everyone talking about City? And I call it that they're the monster in the distance. We're the monster now.
Yeah.
We're the monsters now. They know it. And that's why they went back after us, because they know we're coming. This isn't a cute team that's trying to compete anymore. We're not all, smiles and giggles, and some of the mentality stuff is a little overplayed, but at a certain point, like, if we assume the worst intentions from Trossard, that's a statement of intent. We're coming. No, scratch that. We're not coming. We're here. I could say some other things too, but this is a family-friendly show. This is not a team that is afraid of Manchester City. City has not beaten us in the last 4 games. They have not beaten us.
Right.
Now, granted, I'd like more than one win out of that 4, but consider where we were coming into this run of games, these 3 away games, 3 difficult away games in 8 days, and we came out here with 5 points. Also consider that we have now played away to Villa, away to Spurs, and away to City. We got 7 out of 9 points from those games. We're 5 games into the season. We have 33 games to go. Our next game is Leicester.
Right.
And with all due respect to Leicester, and I say our next league game, I should say, is Leicester. Obviously, we have Bolton in the League Cup on Wednesday, if you're interested. But yes. We have Leicester, and then we have Leicester and Southampton, and then Bournemouth in our next 3 Premier League games. It's a lot of points potentially on the table. Again, we can't, obviously everybody's high in the emotion and everything. We're feeling our oats and all that. We're going to play City again in February. The focus has to be on the next game in front of you.
Yeah.
Maybe not Bolton, because we'll see how they approach the League Cup, but definitely Leicester. Take care of Leicester, and then it's on to the next one. And we're gonna, and I think this is a team I think has the mentality. Now, obviously, Odegaard's probably still out for a while longer. It's not good. I heard somewhere 8 weeks, which I don't.
No.
It's not great. But if we can work our way through, we worked our way through a tricky, difficult part of the schedule. I'm not saying it opens up at this point, but it does look a little different having those 3 big away games. Again, Villa, Spurs, and City all off the table now. We get 4 straight home games before the next international break. There's a chance to do a lot of good. Keep focused. Obviously, we'll be without Trossard, but keep focused and just start racking up wins again.
Yeah. So I'll try to keep the post-match questions to a minimum, but there's a couple interesting ones I wanted to talk about. So first, there's a question that I answered myself. Like it said Asahi on Pep's jacket, Pep Guardiola, after it was pouring. We didn't even mention it was pouring rain for a lot of the match.
Heightens the drama, though.
Yeah. So he pulls on his team branded jacket. Usually, he's just wearing his sweater, kind of similarly to how Arteta dresses. But he's wearing, team attire, and it says Asahi on it. And I'm thinking, is this some like Arab title given to the head coach or something? I don't know what that's supposed to be. And then I noticed the same name on the sideboard as like, oh no, it's a Japanese beer. So they have jacket sponsors in addition to shirt sponsors.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I mean, I know, and that's a sort of especially in a big club like City, is going to have a lot of, Asahi's a Japanese beer. It's a fairly common one. It's okay.
As a non-drinker, I was not familiar with it.
The Japanese are not particularly well known for their beer, but it's not bad.
Okay. It sounds from their ads like it's particularly dry, I guess. So
sure. I don't know the last time I had an Asahi or a Sapporo or any of them anyway.
So I'm not done with the questions on Pep Guardiola's jacket. So in the area on the chest where we've seen from Arsenal, it always has the staff members' initials on it. And I think players too. I think theirs may have their number. It may also have their initials on it.
Players will have the number.
Yeah. But for the staff, it always has their initials on it. Pep says M.E. Is that just like flippant? Like, oh, well, it's me? Or because his last name begins with G. Pep may or may not be his actual first name. It's probably a nickname of some kind, but where does that come from?
It's Josep. So yes, it would be. I guess if you were to do it, it would be JG.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I know. I noticed that too. A few of us were joking about that. Yeah, we can't figure out if his jacket is just for me.
Yeah.
I mean, the real obvious, the honest, probably the obvious answer is it's just someone else's jacket.
Okay.
I think it just might be as simple as that. that it's somebody else's coat.
That could
be. Why he has it is not clear to me. I don't know, but yeah, that's what I think that is.
So somebody else is getting soaked while he wears their jacket. All right, and then the bunker. So we usually talk about the bunker and counter strategy, right? Where like, you defend, then you get your chance and you break and you try to score at that point. But this bunker with no countering strategy is new to me. Have you seen this before? I'm pretty confident I haven't seen this before.
I mean, it comes about in this exact circumstance. You're defending a lead, you're down a man. Like, yeah, there's no upside.
Yeah.
Or it's so difficult, and partly because of who you're playing. Like, if you're down a man and defending a 1-goal lead, you're going to cede a lot of possession. But Manchester City is one of the few teams in the world who could make it 92-8. Like that. Some of that is a bit unusual because of the circumstances. But yeah, I mean that's the kind of. I mean, anytime a team gets a lead against City, that's pretty much what they do.
Right.
Because that's kind of how you have to play them. You kind of hold on. You try to steal a lead and hold on for dear life.
Yeah. All right. And then last one is, so because of the unusual circumstances of Odegaard still being injured, so Saka was wearing the captain's armband until he was subbed out. When he was subbed out, the armband went to Gabriel. As far as you're aware, is this his first time wearing the armband? Is this his first captaincy for Arsenal?
No, I've seen him wear it before.
Okay.
I feel like I don't remember if he ever started a game with it, but he's definitely been in a few places where, as a result of substitutions, he's sort of the leader on the team. Most teams, they'll have the captain, Odegaard, but there's definitely a captain hierarchy, so that they kind of know when the captain's coming off, he knows who the armband is going to. And so Gabriel is somewhere in that leadership hierarchy, and so he is in line to receive the armband, and so that I have seen it before. Saka as the captain was I'm trying to remember if I'd ever seen that before, which I thought was interesting. But I get that, but I'm sure it's one of those that has, but I just didn't recall that one.
Okay. Any further comments before we shift to player of the week?
Not that I can say on this show.
There's preschool toys present. All right. So who is your pick for player of the week?
It's David Raya. I'm not going to drag this out. He was obviously the double save against Atalanta was pretty great. And I thought he was fantastic in trying to hang on in the second half of the City game. For me, it's David Raya, especially given how I have a lot of nice things to say about the way we played in the City game. I don't have a lot of things to say at all about the way we played in the Atalanta game for all the reasons we discussed. So, yeah, for me, it's Raya.
Yeah, no, definitely good pick. I mean, the only thing preventing me from picking him is I feel like I'm picking him every week this season, and I don't want to do that, but he's so good. So
that's because you're actually in the goalkeepers union. So of course you're gonna.
Not officially, not yet. But yeah, so I will, since you picked him, I don't have to. I've got to go for Calafiori. I mean, as a first-time Arsenal goal scorer, for one thing, as continuing the trend of Arsenal defensive goal scoring for another, right? Like, this is kind of emblematic of our spreading the goals around. Like, Gabriel's had multiple this season. Like, that's something that we do, and I think that's interesting and worth noting about our team. But also, just as a token of the entire defensive effort that made up this second half of the City match. And yeah, I'm not... My feelings on player of the week is very heavily skewed in favor of the City match, just because it is such a monumental part of this week compared to Atalanta, which really wasn't. Yeah. So just, I will always remember this second half I'll probably remember the first half too, but especially the second half. I don't know that I will ever see something exactly like that for an entire half of the match and sticking in it for so long. And they did such an amazing job. And I think he is as good a stand-in as any, because it's hard to. They all did such an amazing job that entire time, just blocking wave after wave. So it's difficult to pick just one of them. And I think Calafiore as one of the 2 defensive goal scorers of this match. And then one who's it's his first time, I think. Give it to him.
First opens his Arsenal account, as they say. Yeah, it is a point, actually. I hadn't quite picked up on that. You're right. Both the goals today were defenders. And actually, all we scored 3 goals in this away, incredible away week. And it was, Gabriel, Calafiore, Gabriel. So it was 3 goals, right. 3 goals, all by defenders.
Yeah. All right. So what is coming up this week?
So we're going to take the temperature down slightly. Wednesday, 3rd round of the Carabao Cup. We're back home at last. Home to Bolton Wanderers. Apparently the Carabao Cup is now on Paramount Plus.
Oh, okay.
Which I just saw. Yeah, it's on Paramount Plus, not ESPN Plus, which still has the FA Cup, but that's in January. Paramount Plus, Bolton Wanderers on Wednesday. I got to be honest, I don't have a freaking clue who's going to play in this game. Probably a lot of those bench players we were kind of laughing about last week in the Spurs game, going, who are these guys? You're probably going to see a lot of them. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Lewis Skelly and Wanyeri get starts. I kind of expect that. Beyond that, though, it wouldn't surprise me to see some of the younger guys. I expect probably Kivior gets a lot of run out. I don't remember. I think Trossard is officially suspended for the next Premier League game. Sometimes you hear some of these cards. It depends on who sanctions the competition, and a card in like the FA Cup. I don't remember. I'm pretty sure Trossard's allowed to play in the Carabao Cup, in which case I expect him to. It'd be interesting to see what they do with the keeper, because you'll remember Neto is actually cup tied with Bournemouth.
Right.
So we might see Tommy Setford, who's the third string young keeper. Or we might see Raya again, although, I don't know about that. Anyway, Carabao Cup, Wednesday, Paramount Plus. Be there virtually. Because we have a real shot at that cup, I think, possibly.
Okay.
With this one, I never really know. And then Saturday, back to the league on Peacock, we're going to play Leicester City.
Yeah.
So, heads on straight. Leicester City is a team that we should do things to.
Yeah.
And I would like them to do that. So let's do that.
Well, yeah, and this is our first Premier League match that is not notable enough to warrant network coverage, so it's on Peacock, not USA or any of the NBC sports channels.
I'm sure there's another. I'm sure that I haven't seen. I honestly have stopped caring what other games are up to this point. I'm sure there's another game that you look at and go, yeah, that's kind of a big game. That'd be good to be on TV. Yeah. It'll be nice to have a Saturday instead of these sort of midday Sundays. The pub will be a little less crowded, I think, for this one.
Yeah.
City, that game was a bit of a madhouse there on Sunday, which is good.
Sure,
it's because the team is good, because it's a big game and you enjoy the excitement of it all.
How many City fans were there? Was it all you guys, or did anybody else come in to see the match?
There were 1 or 2 people there who were wearing City shirts. I think they knew somebody else they were there with, because otherwise that's a really curious decision. Because there is a bar that City is a City bar. There was actually a group in the corner. The Barcelona fans as well were there, and they were watching their game, which is weird. Random moments in the second half, a cheer would come up, what's going on? Oh, Barcelona scored.
Oh, funny. All right, well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to say hi by commenting on one of our videos on your platform of choice. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talk about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
We're coming for you.